Alright, welcome back to the Six Flags merger video where we're going to go through all the parks from smallest to biggest and see what their 5-year plan could look like. Now I'm going to be uploading 2 videos from now on because I think once we get to these smaller parks, there's a cheapskate guide and then there's a realistic guide. So I'm going to look at my own plan for it for Michigan's Adventure, and then I'm also going to give my cheapskate version, which is going to be the Six Flags version of cheap things that Six Flags could do to make this park better. Because honestly, this park really doesn't need that much to make it a top tier park, or not really a top tier, but a mid tier park. A park that's serviceable and will be more revenue based. It really only needs a standout coaster for people to be drawn to the park, and that's really all it needs. Everything else would just be fixes around the edges, which I'll make another video on after this one, but this is going to be my 5-year plan for Michigan's Adventure in the Six Flags merger deal. So, Michigan's Adventure is a Cedar Fair property and is now a Six Flags property under the merger between the two companies. Michigan's Adventure and Wildwater Adventure, the water park, is located in a small Michigan town, not even in Detroit, where you'd think it'd be located. As you can see, Michigan's Adventure has a pretty good skyline. It has 3 wooden coasters, a nice SLC, a nice sky swing, a nice water park area, and some nice flat rides as well. But for the most part, it's a very small park. But that lake can be, I think, if we overload that lake to where like you put the coasters all around the lake, I think it'll work out pretty well. So looking at the map for Michigan's Adventure, I'm going to focus more on the bottom left. As you can see, where Woodstock Express and Zach Zoomer is. I think if we convert that to a Camp Snoopy area of the park, it will fit in with the Peanuts theme that Cedar Fair owns the rights to, and it'll make it so we can add a bunch of flat rides, get the park going in terms of additions, and then make some coaster adjustments. So we're going to be using the same standard we used before for the Frontier City video for roller coasters. We have standout coaster, the coaster that draws everyone to the park. Airtime, coaster that has a lot of airtime. Multi-looper, coaster with more than 2 inversions, 2 or more inversions. Not on the track, a coaster that is not on the track. Inverted, suspended, winged, 4D. Wood, coaster that's made out of wood. Spin, coaster that spins. Launch, coaster that uses a launch. Water, coaster that runs in water. And other is any coaster that doesn't fit in the categories above, like a mine train, family coaster, kiddie coaster, basically anything that doesn't fit. And for Michigan's Adventure, there are 7 coasters that are currently at the park. Corkscrew is a multi-looper. Mad Mouse is a non-spinning mouse, so it goes in other. Shivering Timbers is a wooden coaster. Thunderhawk is a multi-looper and a not-on-the-track coaster because it is a coaster that hangs under the track. Wolverine Wildcat is a wooden coaster. Woodstock Express is a family coaster, so it goes in other, and Zach Zoomer is another family wooden coaster. So as you can see, the X's, we have an X in standout, X in spin, X in launch, X in water. As you know from our last video, we found one coaster that gets the spin, the launch, and the water off the board, so we'll be talking about that coaster for sure. But let's move on to the main presentation. So for Michigan's Adventure, just like I said, I'm going to convert that bottom left area into a Camp Snoopy area and add 3 little flat rides. These flat rides are the cheapest of the bunch, cheap, inexpensive, and they're going to be basically themed to Camp Snoopy. We have Convoy, which are mini go-karts, as you can see, little kid-sized go-karts. Mini Ferris wheel but kid-sized. Flying Tigers, which is a kiddie kind of swing ride, just swings around, spins around. It's kind of like a carousel, but it's got multiple types of swings. And yeah, I think the planes can be called Flying Ace themed. Lucy's Krabby Cabbies, which is already the Cedar Fair name, can be given to the go-karts. And then the Ferris wheel can just be called like Peanuts wheel, or has like the faces of all the Charlie Brown characters on it. So I think for 2024, those 3 flat rides added to the park gives the park some more rides for children. And any investment is still a good investment for this small park. In 2025, it's going to be a small change. This is a change that I think that fits this park's cheap budget pretty well. It's a pretty cheap fix. 2026 is the anniversary of the park, so not going to do anything too big for the park until then. So we're just going to do some park restoration, clean up the park a little bit, rebrand the park with some Looney Tunes and DC themes because of the merger, and then we're going to do an RMC conversion of Zack Zoomer. Zack Zoomer is the family wooden coaster, as you can see in the left-hand side, that sits towards the entrance of the park, and I think we can RMC convert this to any one of these two images. So the image in the bottom is a wild moose. I don't think they're going to do that because Zack Zoomer is more of a cyclone. I think it's more going to be the top right image of the family RMC coaster, but RMC can do whatever they want. I think just a family RMC coaster, it's cheap and they can already use the structure of Zack Zoomer, so they can just rebrand the name, use the wooden structure. Usually an RMC conversion of a wooden coaster is cheaper than a ground up coaster, so I mean it's a cheap way to get sort of new coaster and really doesn't do much besides help the park rebrand itself with a new face for the Zack Zoomer with the help of RMC. And then in 2026, we're going to be looking at a new coaster. 2026, we already have the RMC conversion of Zack Zoomer done, and then we want a new coaster. And I think for the anniversary, they want to go for a coaster that's going to fill out the bracket here. And I think the coaster that fills out the bracket, an FFC, a suspended family coaster from Vekoma, that can be used as a Flying Ace aerial chase ride for the Camp Snoopy area, and I do think that should happen in the future. But for now, I'm going to go with probably the one that most people saw coming, the Disc Coaster by Zamperla. Water coaster, spinning coaster, launch coaster. It basically fills all the things the park needs. It needs a water coaster, needs a launch, needs a spinny coaster. I mean, that's pretty much all you can hope for at that point. So I think in 2026, we have the RMC conversion already done of Zack Zoomer. That gives the park a new rebranded coaster and a new coaster on top of that. That's one of the cheapest coaster models to get. 2 coasters in 1 year. I mean, that's a pretty good anniversary. And then 2027, quiet year. I would do a scheduled retracking of the wooden coasters. Maybe add a S&S retrack of Corkscrew as well. Corkscrew is an old aero coaster, but the retracking of Carolina Cyclone at Carowinds did wonders for that coaster. It's actually a lot smoother now. So I think an S&S retrack of the old aero coaster Corkscrew could pump new life into that coaster because it is quite painful. And I think the final thing, add one of the cheapest of cheap rides. It's not even a freaking flat ride, it's just an e-puff train ride. You see these at small malls across the country, so it's literally the cheapest of the cheap. Just add one of these, it just, kids get on it, and they just get a small little tour of Camp Snoopy area, call it like the Woodstock Express or something, and boom, you've already got a name. So 2027 is going to be mostly a quiet year for the park. Alright, in 2028, I can see 3 coasters for this new coaster, and honestly, for the new coaster, I mean, we were looking for a standout coaster, so really, we're not looking for a suspended family coaster from Vekoma, but I still think the park needs one of those. They're cheap, and it's a family coaster, so it works out. The park is mostly going to be for families at this point. They already have all the thrill coasters they need besides their standout coaster, so we're basically looking at the Thunderbolt model by Zamperla, which is on the cheaper side, and the Hyper GTX, which is $5 to $7 million by chance rides. But like I said in our Frontier City video, I think every single lower tier park either needs a Hyper GTX or a small B&M Hyper. It needs an airtime machine. It either needs an RMC or an airtime machine that's like a hyper coaster. So of course I'm going with the Hyper GTX for Michigan's Adventure as well. I think if it can't afford an RMC conversion of Wolverine Wildcat, which looks like they're going to keep that coaster around, so honestly, if they're not going to do that, then they have to go with a Hyper GTX. That's the only reasonable option I see on the table. Hyper GTX's airtime machines, standout coaster, solid standout coaster. It would bring more people to the park, so I think that's what they should do. But now, with those 3 new coasters on the list, that would bring all our coaster total up to 9. coasters. The new rebranding of Zack Zoomer, I just call it Zack Attack. It's just an RMC conversion, so not much is happening. Brainstorm for the water ride. Just make it like stormy, put some clouds, make the car look like a brain, and it'd be a perfect theme for, I guess, Brainstorm. And then the Hyper GTX, a good rhyming sounding name, Hyper Viper. Rhymes, works, and is a pretty slick name. And with these 3 additions, that adds a +1 to our standout. 2 more airtime machines, with Zack Attack being an RMC, which always has airtime, and Hyper Viper, which is an airtime machine as a Hyper GTX. And -1 because Zack Attack, once it gets converted to RMC, will be a hybrid coaster and not a wooden coaster, so -1 there. But we already have 2 big, massive wooden coasters in Wolverine Wildcat and Shivering Timbers, so not big of a loss. And with Brainstorm, we have a +1 category in the spin, launch, and water, filling out those categories. So Michigan's Adventure is pretty stacked on its coaster count, or its coaster chart. Alright, so we've added 7 rides to the park, and honestly these names are going to be probably all Peanut themed, because they're going to be in the Camp Snoopy area. Lucy's Krabby Cabbies for the mini go-karts, Peanut Wheel for the Ferris wheel, Flying Aces for the Flying Tigers plane swing carousel ride, Zack Attack, the RMC conversion, Brainstorm we already talked about, Peanut Train, I'll just call it Peanut Train because Woodstock Express is already a coaster, as we see over here. Woodstock Express is already the family coaster, so can't use that name again. So we're just going to call it the Peanut Train and put some Charlie Brown characters on it. And Hyper Viper's the Chance Hyper GTX. Alright, so where are we going to put this? Well, in the bottom left corner, I already told you guys that we're going to be turning that area into Camp Snoopy. So we're going to be putting Krabby Cabbies right next to the newly designed Zack Attack. The Peanut Wheel is going to be going over here by the picnic, by the information area. Just a nice blank area, as you can see, between Woodstock Express and one of the other flat rides. So just put the mini wheel right there. Flying Aces can go in this other blank space, as you can see, right between all these other flat rides. Just put it right there in the middle with all the other flat rides. All these other flat rides will just get rebranded, rethemed, given new names. Zack Attack, of course, will just be the RMC conversion of that family wooden coaster. Brainstorm will be putting that on that blank space at the lake, so it adds to the skyline of the lake with a nice Zamperla disc coaster going across, nice water coaster with a splashdown effect, pretty cool beans. Peanut Train, I mean, it's going to be going through the Camp Snoopy area, so we're just going to put a station right next to the Krabby Cabbies area, and then that train is just going to go around through a round trip area of the Camp Snoopy area. And for Hyper Viper, we're just going to put it at the front of the park, greets people on the way in, and that's a nice blank space for a Hyper GTX. A big blank space right there for a Hyper GTX. Basically a perfect space. It's like almost entirely blank right at the entrance. Just put the Hyper GTX there, bring people in, and show people. We have the two brand new coasters like right next to each other, except for Brainstorm, which is over by the water park, but that actually works out pretty nicely because it is a water coaster, so right next to the water park is a pretty good fit. And with the other 2 new coasters being right next to the entrance to the parking lot, people can see the new rides to ride right there as they're coming into the park. So, looking at the coaster chart, we have 1 standout, 3 airtime, 2 multi-loopers, 1 not on the track, 2 wooden coasters, 1 spin, 1 lunch, 1 water, and then 2 others. So, we have a filled out chart, and it only took 2 new coasters and a RMC conversion of a family wooden coaster. Beyond 2028, I think they're just going to have to add a new Vekoma SFC called Flying Ace Aerial Chase, put in that Camp Snoopy area. Honestly, if we look at the map again, just put it where that pavilion is, between the 1, 6, and 2, that little pavilion area. You can put it between the new Zack Attack and that pavilion area, just right across. My cursor here, all the way over here, stretches right here, and that's where you can put that Vekoma SFC family suspended coaster. Also, rebrand flat rides to Looney Tunes, rebrand coasters to DC Heroes at some point because the new rebrand, Six Flags bringing in the Warner Brothers IP address rights. So, I mean, You got to put that IP as much as you can. And I think, for the most part, new trains for Thunderhawk, like Riddler's Revenge at Six Flags New England, the ride was absolutely rough and absolutely terrible. Thunderhawk is one of the worst SLCs, so giving it the new trains that made Riddler's Revenge go from one of the worst SLCs to the best SLC, I think giving new trains for Thunderhawk would be the right way to go, and it would make it so that the park doesn't have to spend any money putting down a new coaster for the multi-looper, because they already have. If they do this with Thunderhawk, they don't need a new multi-looper. They already have. They'll just be making their crappy multi-looper one of the better multi-loopers. Alright, and that'll do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like if you like, dislike if you don't, subscribe if you like it, and I'll see you guys next time. Toodaloo!